Well, hello, good morning again, and welcome back to Whispering Hope Sabbath School. We're thankful that you have taken time out again to join us once more as we continue our study of education, Christian education. We've come to lesson number 12, and we're looking at Sabbath. Sabbath, the time for living and experiencing the character of God. That's an interesting take, as it is quite apart from what some might consider to be the normal view of Sabbath. We're talking about Sabbath this week. It's a time for living and experiencing the character of God. That's what we're going to explore. We have again a wonderful group of people here to discuss this week's lesson study. We have appearing for the first time, Brother Nehemiah Joseph. He's an elder over there in New York, serving the Lord. We welcome you, Brother Joseph. We also have back with us this morning Brother Elder Bradley Knowles from the Bendel, Seventh-day Adventist Church. Also, we have Elder Oswald Joseph back with us, no stranger, and Sister Cora Galloway, our regular out of Montserrat, Emerald City, Montserrat. And so together we will take a recap of lesson number 12, education, or the Sabbath, I should say. It's a time for living and experiencing the character of God. Welcome, everyone. Well, we always begin with a memory verse and a word of prayer. And Brother Nehemiah Joseph, you are here this morning for the first time, so I'm going to ask you to bring our memory text to us and also to lead us into a word of prayer.
Yes, I love the King James Version. So the memory verse comes to us from Mark 2, 27 and 28. Mark 2, 27 and 28 says, King James Version. And he said unto them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. Let us pray. Father and our God, I want to thank you for this opportunity where you have afforded us that we can come on the airwaves, Lord, in this time to discuss this most permanent and sweet lesson. We pray that as we all put our heads together and we speak of your goodness this morning, that the world will come to understand that there is a God who is holy, righteous, just, and true. May you be with the moderator, even Kim, be with all the other participants. May our thoughts be your thoughts this morning, I pray, in Jesus' name.
Amen. All right. Thank you so much, Brother Joseph. Thank you so much, Brother Joseph. So, again, we are challenged this week to view the lesson, view the Sabbath. It's not just traditionally as we normally do as a day of rest, but we are being challenged to view it as a means of education, not just a day of physical rest, but a day of education. And so we're told that in order to do that, or to live and experience the character of God through the Sabbath, first thing that we must view it as a time to be awed, what exactly does that mean? A time to be astonished. How can we be astonished through the Sabbath? That's a question to the panel. How can we be astonished as we come to the Sabbath week after week?
If I may say, to start, is impressed. And I'm going to bring the word impressed here to explain being astonished, impressed. And when I was growing up back in the village, I remember that we little boys used to play cricket or any kind of sports. But there were these Adventist fellows who would be on the field with us, right? And even if they're in the wicket batting, they are batting, playing cricket. And they look and see that the sun is about to set. It's getting close to sunset. I'm astonished as how they would drop their back and they would head for home. They would head home because the Sabbath is about to begin. And during the years, I learned that I saw that in the Henrys, in the Edwards, in my growing up days, we were playing. And then I'm saying, I'm impressed. Now that I learned, I am impressed to know that they would leave, stop playing, stop enjoying what they enjoyed to go and to celebrate the Sabbath.
Okay. Joseph, unmute your mic.
All right. If we would put ourselves in Adam's place just for a minute, and would remind ourselves that the first Sabbath was Adam's first full day after his creation, and you couldn't even begin to imagine how astonished and awed Adam was as he looked at the beauty of God's creation, all those animals, the fruits and the plants. And I mean, could you imagine? You're just created and you wake up and this is what you're seeing. God putting all these things in place for you as it was. It's like waking up Christmas morning, Elder Kim, and under the Christmas tree, you find this present that you were so longing for, that your dream has come true. And God, your father or your mother, not certainly Santa Claus, has provided these things for you. I can just imagine how Adam must have felt, experiencing all of God's goodness on this first full day that he lived. So Adam's first full day that he lived on earth was a Sabbath. And all these things that God had provided for him. And as Elder Nehemiah rightly said, I said it over and over. I go back in the times and I remember Marl Wayne and his brothers and all those Randolph and all those others. I live in the alley and they were playing right next door. And I had the same experience as Brother Nehemiah, you know. And I found that on Sundays they would come from church and the Adventists are down there enjoying their little cricket. And we just take off our church clothes and we go down there to unite with them. But they would never do it with us when it comes Sabbath. That was something that always stood out in my mind. And so, regardless what it was, I always found it a necessity that when it is Sabbath, I try as much as possible to remind myself that this is God's day. And that anything that I am going to do on this particular day should be about God and what he wants for my life. It's just odd when you think about all that God has put in place for us, especially on this Sabbath day, where you can really clear your mind from everything and concentrate on God. Thank you.
Sister Cora, Elder, and Elder Knowles and Pastor Joseph, you're just joining us. I think it's safe to say that one of the foremost images that come to mind when we think about Sabbath is physical rest. You know, the week is ended, the work week is ended. It's time for us to enter into that rest. But the quarterly, again, and the lesson is challenging us to move beyond that mere perception of the Sabbath and to see it as an educative experience, an educative time in which we are to be again astonished. Elder Joseph just talked about Adam and Eve being in garden paradise, you know, being with God himself and how they must have been amazed, you know. What is it today in the Sabbath, in the world that we have, that can bring us to that point of being amazed again and again and again at God?
I think just to expand more upon it, when you think about the Sabbath, apart from rest, it's also a time to learn. It's also a time of rediscovery. And so as it relates to amazingness and what we have, in the times of the disciples, what they would do on the Sabbath day, they would go in the sanctuary, they would teach about, Jesus who has just, been resurrected. And so part of the amazement is learning bringing it back to what we're doing, learning about God, because that is what the Sabbath is all about. It is all about teaching. It's a time about knowing God. It's the time about sharing. And so going on from what the previous panelist members would have said, where, it was amazing growing to see where these young people would put down their playtime and go and honor the Sabbath. We still have that today. We have that in terms of being the light, because in the lesson it says that where it speaks about the Sabbath being given for man, that man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath for man. It's speaking to the fact that we could honor God in all that we do. And when persons are looking on, that in itself is an amazement, having that discipline. So I think that it still exists today. Yes, we had, Adam being astonished. But even now, when people see that we have that discipline because of our love for God and that desire to be obedient.
Right. Elder Knowles or Pastor?
Okay. I want to zero in on the Sabbath as a special gift that God would have given to us. Okay. The fact that the Bible tells us that God rested. He is the one who rested from his labor. And during his rest time, he made a determination that he wanted to spend that time with us. That is amazing to me and astonishing, because you tell me this, the God that created me want to spend quality time with me. If we go back to the garden, we would notice that for 6 days in the week, God will come down in the cool of the day and spend a little time. But on Sabbath, it was the whole day. We could sit down and meditate and laugh and educate and have a wonderful time with his new creation. And so God has extended it to us now. In fact, what I actually like, especially when we understand that the Bible says the Sabbath was made for us. It's supposed to be a time for joy. But what I find is many times we zero in too much on the test section of the Sabbath, rather than understanding the educative part of it and the joy, and so you can find in serving God. Because the Sabbath is not a burden. It was never intended to be a burden. The Sabbath is a time of freedom. In fact, the Sabbath should actually be the best day of the week, when you can lay all your burdens aside. I'm still astonished. I'm still amazed at how I can just put everything down, just throw it aside, and just reach out to my Creator, my God, and spend quality time with him. Who would want to, give up an experience like that?
Absolutely. All right, Pastor Joseph, before I pick up Elder Knowles on a thought there that he has expressed, which is so powerful, not viewing the Sabbath as a burden, because that idea pretty much runs throughout our society, that somehow we use the Sabbath as a yoke to oppress people. So, Elder Pastor Joseph, you come in there.
The first Sabbath seemed to have been really created by God to ensure that man would bask in the fullness of his presence and just be available to him to grow, develop, explore, take in whatever it was in the environment that would augur for growth and development and happiness, joy, delight. But as we go through life, there seems to be an emphasis on resting from labor. I find that has been the emphasis, and as such, when Sabbath comes, people want to retreat from everything else, just drop everything else. But if we look again at the very first Sabbath, man had no labor before the Sabbath. Therefore, the Sabbath was not designed for Adam to rest. it was designed for Adam to experience God in his fullness. May I just submit here?
Well, Pastor, you made such a powerful point there. I don't normally interrupt you, but I think it is worth you saying that again, that last sentence that you just mentioned, and continue to expand on it. It is such a powerful point that I think it is worth mentioning a second time. Yes.
Yeah, I think the Sabbath was designed so that God's creation could experience God's fullness, could just have the joy of knowing that someone who cares for them, someone who has prepared everything that man needed for existence, would then turn around and say, listen, I just want to come and spend a day with you. Even more impacting is the fact that after the fall, and God made plan for redemption, that God would still come and just abide with Adam and Eve, or abide with mankind, or be present there. It is such a powerful testimony about who God is and his concern for us. Even as we see Jesus as his interaction on earth, he is willing to go against the grain of society, the grain of the church, in order to allow Sabbath to be a meaningful experience for individuals. You know, I was making the point that God designed things in such a way during creation. He took time out to mention that the evening and the morning were the first day. In other words, he gave us the evening, time to recuperate, time to refresh ourselves from the labor of the day before, or in preparation for the labor for the day to come. And such, we needed to utilize that. So that at the end of the week, we are not burdened down with all the labors of the week. That at the end of the week, we would have time sufficient to spend time with him. You know, it is interesting that research continues to discover that it is not so much the cessation of labor at the end of the week that is meaningful for the rejuvenation, joy, and experience of the human, but rather his ability to move away from the mundane things and focus on something that is more enticing is the word that comes to my mind, but something that he yearns for, hopes for, something that he can bask and feel confident that, hey, listen, where I am today, I don't have any other worries in my life, but I'm focused on my God and his creation, and that's enough for me. And I believe that when we have that experience, we are rejuvenated, recharged to meet the world in the coming week.
Absolutely. So let me just pose the question again now, because Adam and Eve would have had a host of activities in which they would have engaged to get that educative experience on that first Sabbath. Today, what are some of those opportunities that still exist for you and I to really experience God and come away astonished, amazed at him again? What are some of those wholesome activities that we can engage in?
For me, exploration of nature. I think that's one of the areas. I know long time ago, we used to kind of just push that in for AY time and have nature walk and nature study and that kind of thing. But I think to a large extent, we have moved away from nature as it relates to the Sabbath. We get up in the morning, we prepare for church, we go to church, we come back, we want to take a little rest before we go off to the programs in the afternoon, and before you know it, the Sabbath is over. And we have not stopped enough to look around and see God in his fullness. One of the beautiful things about the Bible is that it says that the word revealed, as in the Bible, as in Jesus Christ, is enough for our salvation, but yet still God provides nature as another revelation for the expression of who he is. And I think that we have not tapped into that fully as a people today. I think there is more time, there is a need for us to spend more time with his creation. If I might submit, COVID has taught us that we can do church better, more succinctly, and more refreshing than we have done in what seems to be a laborious time from 9 until 1:30 at times. And so perhaps what we need to do is to rethink how we experience the Sabbath as a church in terms of allowing all the aspects of God's creation to affect us and our experience with God.
All right. Well, Nehemiah?
Yes. When we go back to where God planned the Sabbath in that first creation week, we notice that he brought that day and he left it there at the end of chapter 1. Then chapter 2 now comes up, where he blessed and sanctified and so forth. Then God begins to tell us how he made the world. All right, can you imagine that first Sabbath when God was with Adam and Eve? They looking out. But to make that as well, a little point that. But I want to go deeper. God knew that by looking at creation, there would be questions that we would want to ask him. Huh? The different animals, the colors, the sounds, the whatever, the plants, the insects. That now brings in the interaction with God and man. And so we in this day, as we come to Sabbath, and the Bible tells us that the heavens declare the glory of God and all that, and we are with our children or with our families, not only looking at nature, but there are questions that we need to ask, things that we want to discuss that will cause us to fully understand the God who is the creator. Because in Genesis 2, he outlines what he did, that he made man from the dust of the earth, breathed into his nostrils breath of life, and man became a living soul and all these things. And then he gives us a generation of how things happen. This is when now we as individuals today to recognize that the God who put this great universe together have all the answers to our questions that we want to ask him today. The difficulties of your life. What is happening? What is going to happen next? Then you can talk to God directly. You can experience this with your family. Your children ask you questions, your wife, and I like the opening story with the lady there who spent time with this lady and what happened there. Just, I'll be talking about education. Just by her living, her lifestyle, she recognized that there is a God whom you should trust.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to add quickly to that? Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Elder Joseph. Yes.
Elder Kim, I sometimes I ask myself, why is it that God would be so nice to me? And then I say to myself, like I said before, it's one of the things I really try to do. And as that opening statement said, so many times in my life, especially when I travel and study, you find that without even telling people anything, that they would be amazed as how dedicated and how you look forward. In colleges, Elder Kim, my roommate all be amazed. Friday afternoon, we close early on Friday afternoon, and I would pack up all my books, put them in the cupboard, lock that, and the next time that cupboard open is Sunday, because I go to when I was in Washington and they said they had to write this exam on Sabbath before we are dispatched to various universities. And I tell my roommates, my people, I say, no, I really can't do that. Similar to what I mean. I went to administration and explained to them, Elder Kim, that look, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, so. And my friends were amazed that I took this and I said, I really can't write this exam on Sabbath, and that I was allowed to write it the Monday. I go to Trinidad in college and I told the administration, I really cannot go to do these group work on Sabbath. I need to go to church, but I will do all the work for my group on Sunday. No problem. It's the minute people come here and say that, and they do say, prove me, I go see the difference. So all these areas where I find when I travel, and without even saying things to people, when I was in university and I got there, I just couldn't wait, because on Sabbath after church, we go on to the mid-prison ministry and to the VA hospital. You look forward to these things where you can you know, be with God's people and do something to help somebody else. You just can't wait for Sabbath to come.
That's
That
true.
you can not only talk about the resting, but that you can be free in your mind to think about God and to be with God's people. One last thing. I remember Elder came one time in the States, couple of times on Sabbath, you would gather by this pond and they would have lunch there. And they would get a chance, the children, so the young people could ask questions and you talk to them about the agriculture and a little about God's nature. Is beautiful. So even right now, there are still so many things that we can do when it comes Sabbath to enjoy nature. Since where I said, go there in nature, sit and experience nature's God. It is wonderful. And I really thank God for these opportunities where I can minister, even without saying anything to people, by my insistence that God's Sabbath is to be kept, we should worship, and we should fellowship with Him. Thank you very much.
Man.
Absolutely. Right. So the Sabbath presents for us that time where we can again be amazed, be astonished at the God whom we serve. But we also learn that it then presents that opportunity for us again to discover who God is, the identity of God, and who we are. And how do we do that in through the Sabbath experience? How do we come to rediscover who God is and who we are as His people? We know how He did that for the children of Israel with the manna, a double portion on Friday that didn't spoil when it was kept over for the Sabbath. And on the day that they tried to take double portion when they should have taken one, it was spoiled. And so He was teaching them how special the Sabbath is. And by that, they came to discover who their God was. He is the true provider and their identity. How do we do that today, panelists? How do we use the Sabbath to rediscover who God is and our identity?
Well, if I could say, Brother Oswald touched some of the points that I wanted to talk about with regards to the Sabbath and how God really take care of you. You know, I am here in the States and I work with some big companies. Today, my company is working overtime, and that's big money. But I told them I ain't going to work on the Sabbath. And when the big lady came in yesterday, I said no. She said, oh, you're a 7-day Adventist. I said, yes, I worship on the Sabbath. She said, all right. Many times when I go to work with a company, I tell them I'm a 7-day Adventist. You can call me from Sunday until sometime Friday, but after that, you're not going to see me again. And they respect that. They say, oh, that's what you do. And what I find also, since that I have been honoring God's Sabbath, really seriously, God has always opened a door of opportunity for me to witness for Him also and keeps me employed. You see, it is the experience you have with God. It is to know that He who say He will provide, He will provide because He's faithful, right? He does not change. He wants obedience. And once we do that, and the world sees, as a matter of fact, sometimes when I go on a job, as Oswald was saying, people tell me, you are a Christian. They call me, you're a Jesus man. I say, well, they say, there's something in you, you're Jesus man. I say, yes, I'm a 7-day Adventist. So it is imperative for us that when it comes to God's Sabbath, we pay strict adherence to, and let the people them see and know. I am not going to go and do no overtime today. I could have gone because there is no Adventist on the job and nobody know me. But God knows me, so I can't go. You understand the point? And so it is here that we reclaim, we understand, we know that God will provide, He will take care. Because He said, look at the lilies, they spin not. You are more than the lilies. I will provide for you.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Joseph. Yes. Elder Knowles, you want to come in there?
Yeah, let me re-emphasize the topic of our discussion for today. Experiencing and living the character of God. That is quintessential to how we'd want to, discuss. It's important because we first of all have to get an understanding of what character actually is. What is character? It's the mental and moral qualities to an individual. Now, if I'm going to be experiencing this, I have to be doing something similar. Isn't that correct? Yes. So at Sabbath, during Sabbath now, this is what I'm doing. Mentally and morally, I am now not just promoting, but living the qualities, moral qualities to God. So the way I relate to individuals now, because you see, the Sabbath is not just about, I like the pastor highlighted, it's just about me getting physical rest, but it's about me helping to build humanity, because that is what God would have done. I want to build somebody else. I want somebody else to experience the joy that I have in serving God, to let them understand how, let me use the local parlance, how cool God actually is, right? God is not our enemy. That is somebody just far off, far away. And in my experience now, in my day-to-day living, right? I live from Sunday to Saturday a Sabbath keeper, not on Sabbath. Because a Sabbath keeper now, as is enshrined in the commandments, a Sabbath keeper makes sure that his employees get rest. Isn't that correct? Yes, he makes sure that everything is done in accordance with the will of God, because the Sabbath is also a moral issue. Okay, so on Sabbath now, I find this joy, this extreme joy, knowing that I serve a God who would have brought me through the week. I don't go on Sabbaths to and I keep a Sabbath to God. The Sabbath is not a Sabbath to God, it's a Sabbath of God. There's a big difference between the two. It is God's Sabbath, and I respect him. I love him. And every time I want to get into a deeper relationship with him, I want to get closer to my God, right? Knowing that I am nothing without him. I can't survive. Every breath that I take, it comes through him. Every single thing, every part of my experience is connected with that God, and I want everybody to know about it.
Okay, thank you, Elder Knowles. If anyone else wants to weigh in on that, Sister Cora?
What I will say in terms of the time for discovery is that it is essential to know that acknowledging the Sabbath or observing the Sabbath also acknowledges the sovereignty of God and those who refuse to accept him as their creator and king. So, like the Israelites, they were distinguished in terms of when they came out of Egypt to enter the earthly Canaan, that he was known, God, this was known as the God of the Israelites, so the Hebrew God. And so for us, for Seventh-day Adventists, it is when we keep in the Sabbath, it is just as what the panelist member and Brother Nehemiah was saying, that he is automatically recognized for who he is, because he is distinguished because of his loyalty to God in terms of keeping the Sabbath. And I liked what he said in terms of the fact that he could have gone, because there are no Seventh-day Adventists, and so he could have gone and done his overtime and nobody would have known. And that comes back to what in the some of the Jews in those times, that they seemed or had the appearance of keeping the Sabbath, but however, their character, back to what Elder Knowles was saying, their way of living was not reflective of what they were saying. And I think that is important.
Absolutely. So I take that to be a twofold experience, Pastor Joe, in that as it relates to identity, it from my interaction with the Sabbath, my keeping it holy to God, it sends the message to the onlookers that, hey, these people belong to God, the sovereign God who made heaven and earth, and as such, they worship him on the day that he has set aside. And that helps in itself to remind me of who I am, and sends the message also to the onlookers that they are the people of God. But it serves also in another sense. I would think that it reminds me, as Sister Galloway just pointed out, and as I think Brother Nehemiah and also Elder Knowles would have pointed out, because of who I am, because I am a child of God, then I have that responsibility to live like a child of God, Pastor Joe.
Certainly, the Sabbath presents an amazing opportunity for individuals to express to others exactly who God is. If I just step back again, the experiences that Elder Joseph, well, both elders gave in terms of what they were going through, is that they were able to experience God and the character of God as God came through for them when they decided they were going to be honoring him.
Right.
But also the friends and colleagues also experience who God is, because when God is able to keep them in a job, even when they have to miss a day when everybody else is at work, or God is able to help them to be successful in their exams or through their career when everybody else seems to be struggling, says that, hey, listen, experiencing God through the Sabbath really does make a difference. As we go through the Sabbath, Jesus taught that the way we can experience the Sabbath in its fullness is to ensure that the Sabbath has meaning for others. Notice how he himself responded to individuals. The Sabbath ought to be impacting on the lives of individuals, especially those who are less fortunate. So we have the passage that we are dealing with in Isaiah. I think it's Isaiah 58, where Israel is fasting. They've been pious. They've been faithful to the rituals of the religion, and yet still nothing is happening in their experience. And God says, listen, it is not by this constant half-night prayer meeting and fasting every day and fasting every week that things happen for you in your spiritual experience. What the fast that I really want to happen is for you to be compassionate to other people, for you to see the needs of others and recognize those needs and meet those needs. It is when people experience you and your relationship with God that they are able to experience the fullness and blessings of who God is. And so if the Sabbath doesn't become a time when folks who are less fortunate than we are experience blessings, then perhaps the Sabbath doesn't really, that we're not expressing the Sabbath in its fullness. If the Sabbath is not transformational, if the Sabbath sees us trying to gather what we can, our own personal experience in worship, our personal experience standing up before the church and preaching, but it really doesn't impact people, then really the Sabbath, the true full meaning of the Sabbath is not realized. And so what I would encourage us to do is to make sure that as the Sabbath impacts us in terms of our relationship with God, we too must allow it to impact others.
Elder Kem, could I just 2 minutes there? You know, I remember that just before God outlined the 10 commandments to the people, God began by saying, I am the God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. In other words, God is saying, look, all this I'm going to say, I want you to understand that life and all that's involved, Sabbath everything, it's not about you. It is about me. And so I want you to think about me. And I became amazed. I went through this week and seeing how God provided physically for his people. He said, look, you can go to your neighbor's vineyard and you can eat as much grape as you want until you fill your belly, but just don't put any in your containers. You can go to your neighbor's cornfield and you can break corn and eat as much as you want. It's provided, but don't cut down any with your sickle. He said, make sure you pay your servant, especially those that are poor, before sunset, because you know they need a little money to do it. I just say, oh God, always. And he said, look, when you reap the field, don't go back over and pick out everything. Leave the rest in there for the poor people. God is so concerned about people. It amazes me. And so every time that you will sit down, Elder Kim or Pastor, to eat a good Sabbath lunch, what comes to your mind? I have a brother. And every time I sit down to eat, whether it's about any other time up to Thursday night, I call him and say, anyway, where are you? He says, so, I'm in town, can't come home. No, boss. I went for him. I just put in my, I find it funny. You sit down and you eat your fill and you don't think about whether it be your neighbor, your brother, whatever, how they'll get along, and God sees provide for us all of these ways. And I finally, Pastor, could you put yourself, I was sent to Israel on this thing. And then what do I do on a Sabbath? Because I'm not a Jew. I walk up the road and look into the synagogue. Boy, can't go in there. So what do I do? I was in the Maldives, sent in a special mission there, where their Sabbath is Friday. And they have classes. We went there to write a syllabus. And they're working on Sabbath because the Muslims' Sabbath is Friday. Now, what do I do with the people paying me to go there to the thing? What do I do? I say, no, tell them, no, I can't come on Sabbath. You know, and all the time God puts you in these situations where you have to make sure you make up my will. Do I go along because this is what it is? Okay, they pay me to go there, they put me up there. What do I do on the Sabbath? And over I find the service, well, no, I'm not going to do it. But I respectfully state my case to them. Well, because of so-and-so, and I was never put in a situation to be embarrassed or anything like that. So it is good that we could look about all these things. And people are sick. How is it on Friday night, Friday evening, you put with all this kind of thing? You go on all this Sabbath, on Sabbath I'm by the drill, more the country drill, and the next Sunday I'm going by the with Tom prison. So all this weekend, I find myself joyfully doing something to help others. And at the end of the day, I didn't fail any exam. I didn't fail anything. In fact, I graduated with honors. And so we're saying, you put God first, especially when it comes to Sabbath. And your friends and you think and notice, well, Elder Drift is gone for the whole weekend. And yet still he's doing so well in school. I find it is always my pleasure, Pastor, when you travel, especially living with people, let them look. I want to get to church on Sabbath and I want to get there on time. And they always come through for me, and God has always been blessed. I just like to think about Sabbath, Pastor, being with God's people, seeing how God works, and just enjoy fellowshipping. And not only that, but helping others who I know need that particular help. Thank you so much.
Wow. So there's a quotation on Friday. There's a sentence on Friday, and not so much a quotation, but I want to bring before the panel and for us to discuss that a little bit and to perhaps pursue how it is that we go about doing that. The statement is that it requires holy people to keep the Sabbath holy. What do you gather from that? And how is that attained? How is that accomplished? Pastor Joe, you want to start? Or yes.
A rather interesting statement. Again, our holiness comes from the fact that we are surrendered to God, and it is Christ's holiness that makes us holy. And there is a tendency to believe that our holiness comes from our doings, but rather it comes from our surrender and our covering of Jesus Christ. It is in that context that you are able now to keep the Sabbath holy because of your relationship with God. Yeah. Now, if you go back, Elder Joseph made reference to the 10 Commandments. Within the covenant relationship of that God seek to reestablish with Israel after they came out of Egypt is the whole idea of the Sabbath. And what he said is not what we sometimes say today. Sometimes we say that we have to keep the Sabbath. But what God asks us to do is to keep the Sabbath holy. In other words, the Sabbath is holy. The Sabbath is set aside the Sabbath is something special for him, and we need to keep it that way. We sometimes treat the Sabbath the way the servant that got the 1 talent treated the talent. In other words, we have the Sabbath, and we try to do everything else that we think we should not do because we don't want to offend God about the Sabbath. And in so doing, we really miss the mark. In so doing, we miss the mark. What God wants us to do is to not pollute the Sabbath, not desecrate the Sabbath, not treat the Sabbath as if it is ours, but rather to recognize that it is God's time that he has set aside, and we ought to obey and respect that. When we have a relationship with God, when we are covered by his blood, we acknowledge that, hey, listen, this is God's time, and we can't treat it as if it is our time. We can't treat it as if it's the boss' time. We can't treat it as if it is the school's time. We have to treat it as if it is God's time. And that is why it is essential for us to keep that focus. Even as pastors, we see the time as being for our religious activities rather than a time when we should celebrate God and allow others to experience the fullness of God. And so that was a mistake that Israel made in the past, that they were hedging around the Sabbath with all the things that you should not do in order to maintain themselves from polluting the Sabbath. But in essence, they were disrespecting, disregarding, and desecrating the Sabbath by their very action. So that our relationship with God, that challenges us to live faithful to the principles of God, that challenges us to live faithful and committed neighborly with our fellow beings, is what is required as we approach the Sabbath.
Okay, beautiful. And anyone else wants to comment on that? I think that is
Yes.
yes, go right ahead.
If you would allow me, we notice from creation that God placed the Sabbath right there, right? And then he makes it holy. Who is it that is holy? It's God himself. We ascertain our holiness when we surrender our lives to God and we put on Christ, we become like him. So we have bowels of mercy and bowels of compassion and all those things that we exhibit to others, especially on the Sabbath day, because right now I'm starved. I'm starved. I can't go on the train to preach. I can't go into the hospitals that I want to. I can't go into homes. So these are the things that I do on Sabbaths, especially. I can't do them because of this pandemic. So we see God, what Christ did on earth was that on Sabbaths, especially days where we see the healing and all these things on the Sabbath. Throughout the week, he was feeding the people, yes, preaching, but there was something special he did on the Sabbaths. So the Sabbath now becomes a delight. Which one of us do not want to be healed? All of us want to be healed of any infirmities in our lives. So then it is the character of Christ, the holiness of Christ, the love of Christ within our hearts, which would propel us to be able to get up and go and do what Christ did, so that the world would know about the goodness of God, his holiness, which he tells us in Ezekiel, that I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, to know that I am the God who do what? Sanctifies them. So it encapsulates and cements the relationship between us and God when we do his will and keep his Sabbaths.
Absolutely. No, I'm sure that it hasn't escaped us that most of the times our children, for one reason or another, and perhaps good reason, often tend to view the Sabbath as a burden, as a prison, because all they ever hear is, you can't do this, you're not supposed to do that, you're not supposed to do that. How do we undo that? And so that we're focusing not so much on the do nots, important as they may be, But on the do's, because I tend to think that for every don't in the Bible, there are 101 do's. So how do we how do we come to that as it relates to the Sabbath, so that we begin to see it as truly a day of delight?
Yeah,
Knows you
I'll
want to come in there? Oh,
actually,
Sister Cora, go right ahead. Yes.
because I get that every single Sabbath.
Ah,
When my son says, "Oh, mommy, I can't wait until the Sabbath is over so that I could do X, Y, and Z." But the good thing is that he knows. So it starts from a point of he knows from Friday sunset, and he'll be looking on Saturday. Has the sun set yet? Has the sun set yet? And so ways to counter that is to make the Sabbath learning exciting. For an example, teaching the 28 beliefs. He could tell you, if I get that wrong, he'll be like, no, that's number 18. So, making the learning fun. There's nothing wrong in making it fun, because when you think about the Sabbath, it is living a life that is reflective of Christ. And so if we are not holy, we cannot display Christ, even if we are keeping the Sabbath. And so one of the essential elements is that whatever is being taught on the Sabbath, it also flows through the rest of the week. And so you have things like, he'll say, "Mama, please don't pray too long." So these are all the things that they do. They're essential parts that you're teaching, but you also happen to listen to ensure that you keep them engaged. So sometimes he would say that he wants to pray instead. And so it's all about telling them why it's necessary, teaching about the relationship with God, the importance of the Sabbath. And so sometimes he himself, because my parents aren't Adventists, so he would tell them, "You're not supposed to eat, X, Y, Z." So, the scripture says, even the little children will lead them. And so he gets into those, strong discussions as to what he believes, and that is because I am persistent. So back to your question, although, he would complain and say, "Yes, I cannot do this on the Sabbath, I cannot do that," it is still being reinforced, it is still there. And when he's having conversation with others, what he has been taught, he is also telling others. And so that is what we are to do. We are to teach others about the way, and the little seeds, they will get planted. You might not see them, germinate straight away, but the seeds are planted, and we should not give up hope.
absolutely. Yeah. Okay. All right. Nosy wanted to come in here quickly. We have about 4 minutes remaining. So if you will make your point there, then we'll take the wrap-up comments and go right ahead, Nosy.
All right. I can remember as a young boy how strict my parents were when it came to Sabbath observance. And what used to baffle me is that I was able to take the animals to pasture, but in the yard there was a big mango tree, and the mango be right by your hand, and you can't pick it. It has to drop first. So Sabbath is supposed to be, Sabbath is an experience. It's actually work in progress. So what do I do? Should we do? We teach our children to enjoy the do's, and the do's will cancel out the don'ts. So the don'ts would really have this kind of value, like they have. The Sabbath becomes now an attractive, something that's very attractive. So now they find joy in Sabbath now, because the other things don't really seem that important anymore. So I think this is critically important, right? It's a work in progress, and we have to make sure that we continue educating our children.
Absolutely. I know we didn't get to touch it, but this what we are going to do in a little while. We are going to come together for corporate worship. The Sabbath provides opportunity for community. It is so important. So perhaps we can each touch on that in our closing remark, beginning with Elder Oswald Joseph. And then yes.
Yeah, it is one of the things, I guess we could always remind ourselves to look forward to, is the coming together. Because regardless how your week was, and sometimes it's not a very good week for sure, but you look forward to that time when you can meet with God's people in God's house. And there's nothing better than that. You know, last week we remember that it was told to us, worship is a gift. So when we go to church, we take with us our worship gift, so that irrespective of what happens in Sabbath school, irrespective of what happens during the midday hour, irrespective of what anybody else in church may do, how they may behave, because I went to church with my worship gift to be with God and to be with God's people, I can experience the blessing of the Sabbath, the blessing of worship, and being with people. You know, every time when if I go into church and months that I walking through the crowd and this particular sister and I happen to pass her and didn't say good morning, she'll pull my jacket and say, didn't you see me to say good morning? Elder Joey, because you know, it is just this thing with the go there that, you know, there's somebody is there looking out and they're expecting this. It's just a joy to be, and I really enjoy being at church, being with God's people, and everybody you learn something from, regardless who he is. You learn something from somebody, something they may say, an experience they may give, or a little talk that they may have with you. You look forward to that. That's why God made us down here, put us in a community where we can fellowship one with the other and with him on his Sabbath, the best day of all the days. Thank you very much, Elder Kevin.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Pastor, you want to give your parting shot? Then
the Sabbath, again, in terms of community, provides a great experience for the people that we have prayed for, the people that we have encouraged, the people that we have supported during the week, come together and at least see each other's faces, encourage one another, be able to sing the same songs of Zion. A great experience. I know this is COVID time, and so there is limited space for us to worship, but we can still allow people to experience the worship experience by reaching out to them before worship time, if they can't make it to worship, and sharing what the experience was like, to help them be able to appreciate what took place at the worship place. And so that is critical. I wanted to go back to the last question that you asked, and I want to submit this because I think it is very critical as well, in terms of helping children to experience the Sabbath in a positive way. I think sometimes as parents, we can probably take time out, maybe once a quarter. Don't focus on church, but take them into nature and use that time to let them enjoy, let them explore things about nature, whether it be chasing a butterfly or finding a new plant or whatever, and then you sit down and explain things to them. Those are ways that they can enjoy nature. Or enjoy the Sabbath, you know, and experience God, and find it a delight. You know, as we close the year, let us be mindful of the fact that God gave us a beautiful opportunity to spend time with him, to learn from him, to appreciate his goodness. This quarter's lesson reminds us that even though we might be the best person in the world, or even though we might be the most flawed person in the world, that God's love knows no bound. It reaches wherever we are and grasps us and draw us to himself. And we can live with that assurance because God is faithful to his word.
absolutely, absolutely. But Nehemiah, you've got 30 seconds.
Yes, 30 seconds. And let me wrap up quickly. Now, when we congregate and sing the songs of Zion, it is so beautiful. All right? And also, when we congregate, you find that, as Elder Oswald said, you go with your gift. You give your gift, yes, but what happens is that somebody else is going to give you also a gift. And a gift of encouragement. You might be feeling down, but you know when you walk into church, there is somebody who's going to give you such a greeting, just to greet you. That will just make the Sabbath for you. You understand? So that is why it is important that we congregate together so we can feel the warmth and love and embracement one to the other. And as we sing these songs of Zion to encourage us to look forward to the coming of Christ, it really fills our heart with love and gratitude.
Absolutely. Sister Cora, 30 seconds. I see you already, you're ready to go. You're already dressed to go to congregate with the saints.
A favorite scripture of mine is which says, iron sharpeneth iron.
Absolutely.
And so Brother Nehemiah would have touched on some of the things that I wanted to say. So certainly with that, when you meet together with other saints, the experiences that they had, it makes you stronger. If there is a bad week that you've been having, and sometimes we say something and we do not realize the impact that it has on our brothers and our sisters. So it is essential that as we grow together.
Amen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much this morning again for coming on here and Whispering Hope. I truly appreciate the contribution, your thoughts. I know that our viewers and listeners would have been equally encouraged and blessed by your contributions. And next week, God's willing, we have our final lesson in this quarter. We're talking about heaven, education, and eternal learning. Heaven, education, and eternal learning. I'm so excited about the fact that throughout all the ceaseless ages of eternity, we will be forever learning of our God, of ourselves, and it will just be a wonderful, wonderful experience. So we're looking forward to next week's lesson. We want to invite you to come back here next Saturday, the same time, on this same channel. We'll be here. Until then, may God bless you richly and may you enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.